Welcome, everyone. I am Austin Townend. I am the new growth marketing strategist at Ethos Benefits, and I'm going to be your host today. And I am so glad you were all able to make it. You being here puts you ahead of the other 90% who keep saying, yeah, I should probably learn that someday. And you are ahead of the curve. And so you're just so welcome. Today, we are pulling back the curtains on the world of health benefits from a fiduciary standpoint. You will leave today with stories, case studies, strategies, and overall just less concern or fear for your company's health benefits, which is truly not a laughing matter. So I'm going to go over a lot of the liability and how this all works from a fiduciary standpoint. So first up, let's meet the team. These are our speakers today. We've got Patrick Williams, who's co-founder of My Fiduciary Coach, Chelsea Rikus, president of Ethos, and Donovan Rikus, CEO of Ethos. All right, agenda. Here is the itinerary for the day. We're going to keep this learning to an hour, but we will be following these sections. The first three sections are ethos-led, and then afterward, Patrick Williams will be bringing his fiduciary wisdom, and my team will be adding additional insights along the way. So quick note about questions. I want this to be as clear as possible. At Ethos, we love questions. We love them so, so much. So please speak your voice. There is a way for you to chat in the Zoom call. So ask away throughout the webinar. We do have a lot of content, so we're going to be answering them at the end. If we can answer your questions, we will. But a lot of them, the lion's share, will probably be at the end. I do want to give you a couple recommendations. Please add the name of the speaker you are asking questions to. That helps us come back to it and ask the appropriate person. And try to give as much context as you can, because we may not answer that question at the second you do. So if you just say, hey, what's this about? And we don't know what this is anymore, we want to be able to come back to it. So first up, you're about to hear from someone who has built his career on flipping the traditional benefits playbook upside down. He's the heavyweight champion of fiduciary securities advising, an award-winning CEO, and the founder of one of the nation's first fee-based health plan advisory firms. It's our fearless leader, Donovan Rikus.
We needed music for that. That was so good.
Thank you, Austin. That was practically like a Bruce Buffer style introduction. I really appreciate it. Makes me seem a lot more impressive than his reality. So thank you. I'm glad to go over this topic. This is kind of my founding story and my why for getting into employee benefits. Certainly not something I sought out to do as a financial advisor. To be honest, I kind of viewed it as below me and beneath me because, if you look at the healthcare industry, employee benefits industry, the way premiums have risen, the way benefits have decreased, not a very exciting industry to kind of get into. But coming from and understanding the fiduciary background in securities, getting my first glimpse of that first healthcare plan was just wild to me. I didn't understand it. The fiduciary principle and standard has existed since 1940 in this country. And it still does not exist today over in the healthcare consulting kind of insurance brokerage world for employer-sponsored benefits. And that just does not make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense to the people at Ethos and for a lot of our clients who are all on the call today. So the idea, the founding principle is just having that unconflicted advice over into the healthcare space. Everybody that's on the call today, if you're on the call in representation of your company, you're a fiduciary. It only makes sense that the people advising you take that same standard and seriousness to what they do without conflicts. And that's what we're here to do.
Awesome. All right. It's not letting me turn. There we go. Next up she's the 2024 Benefits Pro Advisor of the Year, a national speaker who's graced more stages than hours we've all spent at the DMV. And she originally hails from Canada, which means she knows both hockey fights and how to survive the US healthcare system. It's our resident benefits powerhouse, Chelsea Rikus.
These are really good. Thank you, Austin. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Special shout out to all the Ethos clients on the call. Thank you for fulfilling your ERISA fiduciary duty by getting this training done. I know we said it earlier, but everyone on the call will get a certification after this. So I'm really excited and proud to be hosting this. I think a lot of you probably already know this, but I'll quickly tell you why I care about this topic. Originally from Canada, like Austin said, my first interaction with US healthcare was when I got a brain injury playing college softball. Unfortunately, I had to go back home to Canada and do a brain injury rehab program. And I only spent, a couple days in the hospital in the US, a couple specialist appointments, not a lot of care before going back home. But yet, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of bills found its way back to me in little old Calgary, Alberta, Canada, as a 22-year-old. Had no idea what a deductible was, thought I had insurance, nobody to answer my questions. My parents literally took out a loan to help me pay it down because the collections, it was pretty wild to go through that at that age and be in that position at just 22. So it's really inspired me to do the work that we do today. And I really hope that as we go through this, you're also inspired by the power that you have as decision makers to make quality decisions on behalf of all the people you serve. I know that compliance can seem pretty boring, right? But when we look at this, we can look at it through a different lens of just how much power you actually have and how much leverage you have to do really good things for your teams and the people that you serve. So hopefully today is a great day for everybody, and thank you for being here. So this is also for Ethos clients. Guys, most of what we talk about today is already handled for you. So this is the Ethos fiduciary framework that as a client you are already going through. There's just a few things that you actually have to do, which will be, if you haven't already, deciding who's on your committee, making sure they're the right fit, and then going through the due diligence process that we are ultimately leading for you. So depending on your renewal cycle, you may already be in the middle of this. You may be starting it right after renewal, right before renewal. But either way, the training today is to satisfy that ERISA fiduciary training requirement. But know that everything that we talk about today is already a process that is being handled for you in the background by Ethos and on these quarterly committee meetings that we're having with your teams.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. And I just wanted to clarify for everyone, I think we had some of the chat disabled and it is now working. So if you have any questions about anything we've covered so far, you can now submit those, and going forward, you'll be able to do so. All right. Well, thank you, Chelsea and Donovan. We're going to get into the meat and potatoes here. So finally, we've got the Obi-Wan Kenobi of fiduciary compliance, an accredited investment fiduciary and co-founder of My Fiduciary Coach, Patrick Williams. Take it away, my friend.
All right. Thank you for that warm introduction, and hello to everybody out there. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're located, everyone. And welcome to Module 1 of Fiduciary Education Program, the Fiduciary Duties and Responsibilities. And today we're going to break down what it really means to be a fiduciary under ERISA, who qualifies, what duties you carry, and how to avoid the pitfalls that can lead to liability. It isn't just about legal definitions, it's about understanding your role in protecting plan participants and ensuring compliance. So let's get started. Whoop. Up one. There you go. Okay. So ERISA defines a fiduciary as any individual or entity exercising discretionary control over the management of plan assets. And that includes named fiduciaries such as a plan sponsor. And what's really important to understand is that the plan sponsor is always the default fiduciary. So really important to keep that in mind. You can have more than one fiduciary. So you have a committee, you'll have multiple fiduciaries. But that one individual that functions as a fiduciary can support multiple capacities within your committee. So when you think about this, who are the named fiduciaries within your organization? Or is it just the default plan sponsor? Next up is the the difference between functional fiduciary and settlor. And the fiduciary test is a functional one. It's not about the title. Oftentimes we get questions like who should be on our committee, what titles should they have as far as selecting, and it's not about that. Even with an official appointment, if you're making decisions or exercising control over the plan, you are a fiduciary. I did a call earlier today where it was 6 people from the HR department, and they talked about their process, about how they work with their vendor relationships and going through the process of evaluating all of their vendors. And then they said right at the end, and then we take it to the CFO and the CEO. My question was, do they have the ability to make a decision about plan design or the direction that you're going? Not just on selection of vendor, but actually changing the plan. And they said, yes. I said, they are a fiduciary. So it's really important that you kind of position this appropriately. So even though you might have established a committee, if you allow for that kind of decision making where it includes board members or trustees or even staff to have that discretionary power, that is going to pull them in as a fiduciary. So what's critical here is to distinguish the duties between a fiduciary and settlor. So settlor duties are really administrative functions. Give an example. If you're adding members or deleting members from the census for participation in a particular plan, that's an administrative function. Fiduciaries are really anyone that's implementing plan-related decisions, managing processes, or selecting vendors. So really important to keep that in mind. Settlor decisions are not subject to ERISA fiduciary standards, but fiduciary ones are. So when you think about this, how are you separating what are fiduciary decisions within your organization and who are performing the settlor functions within your organization?
I think we need to go back just one slide.
I can't advance. Nope. Okay, I've gone through this.
Okay. So,
Yep.
is that where you're at, Patrick, or one more?
Slide
more.
5. Yep. Co-fiduciaries. So what's happening here is that named fiduciaries can actually delegate their responsibilities. So as a plan sponsor, you have the ability to delegate your fiduciary responsibilities. And we see that on the retirement plan side where you've got individuals that function as a 321 or a 338. In today's marketplace, we now on the health and welfare side are seeing organizations like what Chelsea and Donovan have created as stepping in and providing fiduciary capacities to organizations to help them manage their responsibilities as it pertains to the health and welfare plan. Okay. So what does that mean as far as for an organization? Well, as an organization and a plan sponsor who's the default fiduciary, you still got to monitor the performance and keep proper documentation and the actions that are being taken. So as a fiduciary, if you're trying to delegate some of that responsibility, you still have that monitoring liability that's going to be important for you to maintain in the event of a DOL audit, for example. So what does a monitoring process look like for you is kind of important to consider as far as part of this process. This is functional and settlor.
Did you want to touch on anything to do with health committees, Patrick?
Certainly, yes. So in regards to the health committees, if you have a health benefit committee that's delegated fiduciary responsibilities, it's important to understand that that is a fiduciary body. So that health committee is going to function as a fiduciary body. What are the next steps as a committee? Well, first of all, you should probably have a written charter. And the charter really kind of allows the committee to give guidance to the committee as to how they go about evaluating vendors and different solutions that you might introduce as part of the health plan. The other side of it too is it's providing, responsibilities to those individuals that make up that health committee. So the charter is very important. And the process to this is that board or C-suite actually appoints and creates this healthcare committee, who then, through that process, appoints the leadership. The reason why you want to do that, well, we've seen this in J&J and some other lawsuits that have taken place, where those individuals, the head of HR and CFOs, have been named in these lawsuits. And so what you want to do is to eliminate and keep those people off of those lawsuits, is to appoint this and the charter and then the individuals within the charter. Now, you might still have that CFO that's going to sit on the committee, and that's fine. But recognize by doing so, they're going to be susceptible to any bad press that might come out of it. The other side of it, though, is that you now have a functioning committee with appointed members, and then at the end of the year, you're providing an annual report back to the C-suite, back to that board of directors of your activities and summarizing. Because again, as a plan sponsor, they still have oversight requirements.
So I just want to pause really quick for the Ethos clients on the call. This fiduciary portal has the committee process completely covered. So from the participant list, I can see there's quite a few of you that already have our committees named. We have the charter done. We have the acknowledgements, the conflict of interest forms. All of that is done. There's a couple of you that we're just about to get started on it. The other thing is documenting your committee insurances. So we're not going to go into that a ton today. I think Patrick will probably touch on cyber and fidelity bond, but it's really important if you do have that board of director structures, that the board of directors has their directors and officers insurance. You guys want to take a look at E&O, the fidelity bond, and also fiduciary insurance. So if you're one of our clients, we're walking you through that process. If you're not, take some notes and just go back. If you have a 401k, you likely already have that fidelity bond in place. And it's really going back and asking, hey, can you add some verbiage around protection on the health and welfare plan as well? So it's not as complicated as it sounds, and it's generally not as expensive as it sounds either. So for my Ethos clients on the call, please, the only thing that I really need you to focus on today really big is, are you appointing the right people to the committee? Which Patrick's going to go in here quickly to tell you kind of who would not be a good fit for that.
Yeah. Well, great segue. So let's just talk real quickly about who are kind of some of the appropriate people that should be part of the committee. Well, obviously, you're going to want HR representation because they understand plan design. You're probably going to want to look to see if you can draw somebody from the finance side because they understand the numbers in the spreadsheet. And as we know, healthcare has a lot of numbers and comes with a lot of spreadsheets. So being able to evaluate those numbers is important. We get a lot of questions about legal. I don't recommend that you have legal as part of your committee, but allow for a legal to come in, especially when you're going through that process of potentially looking at contractual arrangements or evaluating those types of things. And then the last piece is somebody that is representing member at large. And this is typically a mid-management type person that kind of represents and can reflect on the ear of what's happening out in the community and culture and give feedback when you're talking about issues associated with plan design, etc. So from a committee standpoint, those are good guidelines. Okay.
Mhm.
The trustees as fiduciaries, really what we're talking about here is, trustees manage and control plan assets. And we really, unless you're a large, like, health and welfare fund, we don't have trustees that step in. That's not something that we see on a normal basis with a company that's, 200, 500 employees. Okay. But an employee benefit consultant, obviously can be a fiduciary if they're designating that status, and can serve as far as providing some expertise and recommendations to the plan. I'm gonna. What am I doing?
And just go back one more. Or actually a couple more.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Right,
Austin,
Patrick?
are you
What?
able to take over those slide controls?
Yeah,
There,
Austin.
that's the one we want. Austin, go to the one with Donovan. There we go.
Yep, I got it from here, Patrick.
So this kind of, I wanted to just touch on like the broker relationship or the consultant relationship because, I think the first step in a fiduciary process, getting good decisions, this whole framework, the first step that we look to implement really is alignment. And we look at that two ways. One is internal alignment. So that's kind of what Patrick just discussed about a committee and who's going to be on that committee and how are the decisions going to be made with a charter. And then also external alignment. So that's certainly who's giving you advice and how is that advice coming in and how is that compensation from that broker or consultant being paid. I think the broker relationship is one of the stranger relationships in any business because it's one of the few positions, roles, consultants, contractors that you hire, but you don't incentivize. So you're making the decision to hire them and put them in a role, but all the incentives are coming from another party, which is the insurance carrier. And we see a lot of this in the compensation disclosures. There is no fiduciary standard legally in insurance. I think we covered that already. Um, and with the transparency or compensation disclosure statements, they really lay out how they could never possibly give unconflicted advice. We're currently reviewing some and talking to a reporter who's looking to do a story on them. And some of the examples, we put together, we're seeing stuff like additional MSR, which is market service revenue coming from the carriers, additional ECC, enhanced carrier compensation. Uh, Client acknowledges that the broker owns equity interests in some of the insurance carriers they're recommending. Client acknowledges that they might receive trips, concerts, and sporting event tickets from the carriers that they might recommend. All this stuff is really important when we're, trying to start basically the basic functions, which is who is a party to the advice that my company is getting and why.
Awesome. Come back to you here, Patrick.
All right. So, it's important to understand that not every professional you work with, like Donovan spoke to, is going to be a fiduciary. And especially when we're talking about attorneys and accountants, and, consultants, they aren't fiduciaries unless they have discretionary authority or to provide advice for a fee. Is going to pull them in. If they are fiduciaries, you need to make sure that they are going to meet the same ERISA standards that you do. So as a plan fiduciary, so duty of prudence, duty of loyalty. So, how have you gone about verifying whether your professional advisors that you're working with is something you should consider as fiduciaries? And if we move forward, certain individuals are, I'm on prohibited individuals. Sorry.
I'll go back a little. There we go.
Yeah. So there are certain people that are barred from serving as fiduciaries, and it's the responsibility of the committee to make sure that they vet this beforehand. And that is that anybody that's convicted of a crime like fraud or bribery or embezzlement, those people are not eligible to participate as a fiduciary in your committee. And so, not that, these people are walking around, but you need to at least incorporate some kind of vetting to just confirm as part of them signing off on their fiduciary acceptance that they sign off and state that they have none of these types of convictions in their history. So, what's your process for ensuring fiduciaries meet these requirements? Okay.
So Patrick or Austin, can you go back one slide? We're going to talk duty of loyalty and prudence, and then I have something to add after that.
Okay. Sounds good. So, I've talked about duty of loyalty, duty of prudence. What does that mean? Well, duty of loyalty is really defined as they must act solely in the interests of the participants, the beneficiaries. So what does that mean? That you're carrying these duties out prudently. You're not acting on your behalf. Um, you're acting on behalf of the participants. You're following the plan document, and this is something that's really important as a committee, is getting familiar with that summary plan description or that plan document that you have guiding associated with the health plan, because we have seen organizations go through audits and determined that the organization was not following the summary plan description of the health plan, and that's not a good thing, especially associated with the DOL. And then documenting all your covered service providers under ERISA and CAA. Plan sponsors are required to document who their service providers are, what is the compensation, what services are they providing. This all falls under 408B2. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but also their agreements. And then what kind of due diligence did you apply when you hired these organizations? Lastly, cybersecurity policies, and we'll touch on this in a little bit, but cybersecurity is so big. The DOL has committed, endless amount of time in publishing guidance on this for plan sponsors working with service providers, and it's really something that we can no longer glaze over. We need to dig in, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Duty of prudence is, acting on behalf of the plan and exercising skill and care and prudence. What this means really is that you're acting as an individual that's a fiduciary and on this committee, the same prudence that an expert out there in the space would be acting. So it's really important that people understand that when you participate in this committee, you're exercising with care and skill and really kind of honing your knowledge in, from a healthcare standpoint, making appropriate consideration to the facts. And also, fiduciary actions are considered prudent if the fiduciary exercises ordinary care based on facts and circumstances. And so what we're stating there is, hey, if you made a decision to go with this certain plan design based on facts that you had in front of you and data that you had in front of you, that's a good decision. You're not going to get, no one's going to come in and slap your wrist on that. But more importantly, understand that the Department of Labor and courts are measuring prudence by analyzing the process you use to select the health plans or covered service providers. So you need, as part of your committee, a documentation of what your process was in evaluating the health plans.
Does everyone remember as like kids in school and doing like math, they'd be like, hey, show your work, show your work, show your work. This is the showing your work. Austin, you can go one slide forward. So every time I think about the duty of prudence, all that comes to my mind is show your work. So like Patrick was saying, the DOL, they care less right now about what decision you're making and just that you are doing it based on facts, based on appropriate decision making, and you have a process, right? So knowing that, Ethos clients, this is a fully documented process for you. It's in your success document. It's in your fiduciary portal. There's literally notes on why every vendor was selected, the procurement process they went through, et cetera. So the real question, though, is going to be for those that maybe on the call that don't have this process in place, it's not enough to see the same 3 or 4 carrier options every single year. That is not satisfying prudence, right? True fiduciary duty is a lot deeper than that. And it kind of causes you to get maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone. And like Patrick said, you almost have to make yourself a little bit of an expert, like attend webinars on things that maybe, seem scary and out of touch, but at least you can show that you've documented that you went to it, right? Maybe it's reference-based pricing, maybe it's direct contracting, maybe it's ICRA. Whatever it is, just start to captives, right? Start to educate yourself on something other than the same kind of 3 or 4 things that you're looking at every single year. Doesn't mean you have to pick it. It just means you have to show that you're trying, right? And then for Ethos clients, we use a 60-point vendor procurement process. And this ensures that there's basically the unbiased employer-focused outcomes. So we're looking at, for every single vendor, what's your cybersecurity policy, which Patrick will talk a lot more about. We're inquiring about active and open litigation. Do they have conflicts of interests? Do they have shared ownership in any of the other vendors in the plan? Because that is essentially a conflict of interest. Benchmarking fees, setting some KPIs around performance. What would be a good year for this particular vendor, right? How are we going to deem them successful or not? And then also benchmarking their compensation models. We have seen some crazy stuff this year with hidden compensation in contracts. So having some type of a true procurement process is really, really important. And the last thing I'll say is that a lot of RFPs are written by brokers for brokers and will continue to get you the same results. So if you are an employer that's going out for RFP, I highly encourage you to take some of these questions, right? Like, how are you paid? When are you paid? How, all the 408B2 stuff that we're about to talk about, cybersecurity policies, active litigation, conflicts of interest, those are going to get you better outcomes than a lot of the traditional RFP questions that we kind of see in the marketplace.
Yeah, awesome. And I want to clarify, guys, I know this is a really big topic and a really heavy subject. And there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of words, there's a lot of processes that we're talking about. So please submit your questions. We're doing this so you can learn, right? We want to teach you. So please submit your questions. We'll come back to them at the end. And Patrick, take it away.
All right. So this last piece, appropriate considerations, determining the course of action, is reasonably designed to further the purpose of the plan. And so when you're looking at, moving forward and what's appropriate action, what kind of things do you need to take into account? Well, for health plans, you need to take a look at, obviously, what's the financial risk management? How are you managing that risk? Are you self-funded? Are you in a captive? Are you level funded? Are you fully insured? And then taking a look at, how does cash flow work within your organization? Because if you decide to go self-funded and all of a sudden you incur a high level amount of claims, you're going to either have to look at some other source of funding to help you absorb those claims, or move to some type of synthetic funding. There's new products that are coming in the marketplace that are helping out from that standpoint. But also then taking a look at, the network structure. And there's a lot of discussion, and I know that I've had this conversation with Chelsea before about direct primary care contracting. It's a big deal. And the last piece is getting your data, making sure that you're getting your data as a fiduciary is probably the most important thing you can do, because if you're not getting data, how do you go about making decisions? You're basically putting your finger up in the wind and testing to see where it's blowing from. So Next piece is kind of following the plans of the plan document and be familiar with, from a committee standpoint, of all your plan documents, your summary benefit coverages, your summary plan descriptions, and your administrative procedures, and really, walk through that administrative procedure and understand how that works. And carefully review your documents on an ongoing basis. This isn't a one-time set it and forget it. You have to constantly go back and review these things, and as a committee, you can review them together. So make sure that you implement those kinds of steps going forward. Okay, and the last piece is really going to talk about data. And with regards to data, fiduciaries are tasked with the responsibilities of, trying to manage large losses that might affect an organization. So taking into consideration, the purpose and size of the plan. Again, if you're self-funded, looking at that, looking at market conditions and what's happening in the market. And then what's your claims experience looking like? You've got to, again, I go back to data, you've got to be able to gather that data and be able to assess it. It's de-identified, obviously. You don't want to be looking at data that's going to, have any type of HIPAA violation. And then look at what kind of things you're implementing as far as focused interventions. Are you incorporating payment integrity, those types of things, into your process as far as claims? So, and then relying on information from others. So as a fiduciary, you can rely on other individuals in providing you with information, even entities that are performing ministerial functions, but understand you still have to exercise prudence in selecting and retaining those individuals. Um, as far as appointing trustees and other fiduciaries, we've talked about this enough. I think do not appoint based on the position they hold within the organization. um, Fiduciary terms are indefinite. And part of what's really important that I see is within committees that really needs to get addressed is when that individual terms off or leaves the committee, make sure that that individual signs off that they are no longer a fiduciary to the committee, because you could be carrying that individual into the next session as far as from a liability standpoint. You don't want to do that. You want to have somebody, proper processes to manage that.
All right, then I'm gonna take it
All
away.
right, guys. So turning data into decisions. So this is the other strange thing I found coming from securities over to employee benefits, and that was just the lack of data. I often tell the story of my first client that had asked me to help, and the strangest thing about his 37% increase was that it was covered in about 2 paragraphs on one page that he was going to pay that. No justification, no data, no solutions, no benchmarks, nothing, right? So it's important to create some real benchmarks. And I'm not talking phony ones. I've heard of, prospective clients saying, my broker came out and, or this broker came out and told me what my average age is and how many males and females we have. That is not going to do anything, right? We need to find data that actually matters. Where is the money going? We always say the right amount of data is to the penny, right? And on-demand access. And this is something that needs to be fought for during your renewal process. If you don't fight your gag clauses during renewal before you agree to another year's contract, you will never get it. And that's when we have the most success kind of getting that data. And then we're able to put forth some benchmarks and actually have some, productive conversations about where is the company today? What would success look like in 3 to 5 years from now? And what can we do to get there? This is all about, this isn't compliance for checkboxes. This is really the basis for decision making. So fighting for data could not, I mean, it's right after creating a committee, right? We need to have good people on board to make these decisions. And then we need to be equipped with actual data to measure and manage what's happening internally. And what we find the most success with is actually getting the carriers to accept to export the raw data to our third-party data analytics platforms. They do not like to kick you over larger reports or do it any other way. That seems to be the path of least resistance when they don't want to do it. It's something they're used to on their larger clients and larger employers anyway. So if you're in a position where they're pushing back, it's, usually just headcount size where they're willing to do it for an employer that's larger, but not for you. And the path of least resistance usually seems to be just getting them to agree to export it. And we usually have success there. So
Yeah, awesome. And we've got about 10, 11 minutes till we're going to do Q&A. So take it away, Patrick.
Yeah, so just kind of wrapping up reporting and disclosures, as a fiduciary, you must comply with ERISA's reporting and disclosure requirements. Just as an example, 5500's, testing that's associated with your plans. If you have a self-funded plan, the 105H. If you have, 129 plan or 125 plans, they all come with non-discrim testing. And so reporting and meeting those testing requirements is very important as part of the committee. And the last piece that I want to speak to is on the fidelity bond, which is, again, if you're a fully insured plan, just calculate what your annual premium times 10%, and that's what the fidelity bond that you need to have in place is. And if you're a self-funded plan, it's max liability times 10% is what you should have in place for a fidelity bond. And we do see DOL requesting this information when they're outperforming an audit. This is a decision tree that you guys, the slides are going to be made available, it's my understanding, and you are able to walk through and look at all the different scenarios and say, whether or not this individual is a fiduciary to the plan or not. So simply just, the first one is the individual, the plan, is the individual in the plan document or through a process described in the plan document as having the authority over plan operations? Well, if you answer yes, you go straight to being a plan fiduciary. If you answer no, you can go to the next question, which is discussing control. So take that opportunity to kind of work through and with each one of your individuals to determine their fiduciary status. So let's talk about cyber. This is something that we've kicked around with. It's really important. We get a lot of questions in regards to this, and more importantly, how to go about conducting and establishing cyber protection. Well, first of all, like I've stated, make sure that your program's in alignment with the cybersecurity program's best practices. If you just Google DOL cybersecurity program best practices, it will bring you right to the page. Print that, bring it to your meeting, digest it, kick it around, because that's going to be key to helping you implement going forward. And then measurement should be obviously documented. So as you go through this process, make sure you're documenting what your process looks like as part of your overall plan governance for the benefit plan. Other things you can do is obviously ensure like multi-factor authentication and data encryption and those types of things. But as an action step, conduct a regular cybersecurity protection risk assessment aligned with DOL cybersecurities, integrate into the plan governance as part of the documenting, request from all your service providers and gather the cybersecurity policies and procedures. If you have a committee and you request these policies and all of a sudden you find out that one of your vendors doesn't have one, that should be a red light for you to determine, one, do we give them the opportunity to create one and come back to us with it? Or two, do we have to look for a new vendor relationship? The last piece is cybersecurity insurance review. And this is really the cybersecurity insurance that you have with your organization, okay, that the organization's purchased. One, confirm that you've got it. Two, what is it covering? Is it covering the organization or is it covering individuals? And one of the things we've seen is that there's a whole cornucopia of different types of cybersecurity insurance out there and covering organizations. So you want to get comfortable in understanding what you have. Next is implementing strong cyber protection. And we've talked about this. Verify from service providers their credentials, their track records, their insurance coverage, and compliance with currently recognized cybersecurity frameworks. Ensure that they have robust contractual protections that clearly outline their security expectations, breach notification obligations, and liability for responsibilities. I mean, you need to know these things. And then internally, we talked about this multi-factor, incorporating these types of things to alleviate, but really a well-defined incidents response plan. And you're going to hear me talk about that again in 2 seconds, but defining and creating an incident response plan. We had this happen where an organization got fished on, and the next thing you know, they were kind of like, what do we do next? Let's not wait for what do we do next. Let's create the plan so we know what we need to do. Vetting vendors for protection purposes. As a fiduciary, you need to go beyond the service level assurances. It's not just a handshake. And dig into the specifics as far as due diligence, and I've outlined that in the previous slide. Fiduciaries must meet and treat vendor selection and oversight as a matter of an ongoing risk management. So ongoing vendor oversight isn't just smart, it's non-negotiable. It has to happen. Developing cyber protection response plan. Get a documented incidents response plan put together, include who you're going to notify, how you're going to go about containing the breach. That's your plan. And then when is it going to be, uh, when do you report it as vital for cyber protection? Each one of these organizations, you'll see that has been reported in the past, has followed a playbook. And for organizations like yours, you need to develop the playbook. So prepare yourself, create the playbook, and make sure it aligns with the cybersecurity guidance. Two major pieces of legislation in the marketplace I want to talk about. Cunningham versus Cornell. This was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court on unanimous decisions. Okay. And basically, what it says that any compensation paid to a service provider deemed a party of interest may constitute a prohibitive transaction regardless of intent and outcome. So what does this mean? What it means is that we've kind of lowered the bar for plaintiffs no longer to need to allege excessive fees or self-dealing to survive initial stages of litigation, but merely by stating that the plan paid a service provider may be enough. So if you have a situation, especially with this rising cost of healthcare, where you have an employee that comes forward and says, I can't take it anymore, and they go to an attorney and say, listen, these fees are, the cost is just going, the burden of proof is now on the plan sponsor, not the plaintiff. So it's really important as a plan sponsor that you have a documentation process of how you got to making the decision on all of your plan designs and the costs associated with them. So document all your compensation disclosures with all your vendor relationships. That includes brokers, PBMs, networks, wellness, EAPs, everybody. And then access those service agreements to determine if there's any conflicts of interest or unreasonable fees. So really tearing through that, monitoring third-party administrators for compliance, and then maintaining fiduciary insurance with appropriate coverages. This is something that we see a lot. We see a lot of people that miss on the fidelity bond coverage and also the fiduciary insurance. If you're putting together a committee, it's really important that you have fiduciary insurance, because fiduciary insurance not only covers the organization, but also the individuals in the committee. And if you're going to sit on a committee, you want to know you're covered. Last one is Tierra Yachts versus Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. And this really speaks to something that we've seen for a long time, and that is that third-party administrators basically hid behind or shielded themselves behind their agreements and saying that they don't have any fiduciary liability. The Sixth Circuit came back and said, you know what? If you have contracts and abuse the fiduciary duty, if you're a TPA and you're exerting control over plan assets, so what we're saying is, as an organization, you're hiring a TPA to pay the claims with planned assets, and you're profiting from that control. There may be a situation where you're acting as a fiduciary under ERISA. And what was happening in this situation is, what's really important is to look at your contracts, because they were using what was called flip logic and shared savings plans. And so under the Blue Cross arrangement, you can go from Michigan to Wisconsin to Minnesota if you want to. And if you incur a claim and you go to see a Blue Cross provider in that area, you're covered. And it should be treated as in-network benefit. What was happening is they were paying it as an out-of-network benefit and then going and saying, oh, you know what? Through our platform, we're going to go back and recapture that additional expense because it was treated as a out-of-network benefit, and they're collecting the savings. So they had full fiduciary control of what was happening here, and managing the money. And they tried to hide behind the shield, and it came back and said, you're acting as a fiduciary. This case now has progressed. So TR Yachts has been settled. It's now progressed to Wesco versus Blue Cross Blue Shield in Michigan. And that's a class action lawsuit representing a number of employers in Michigan. And so more to come there. But just emphasizes even more why working with an organization and individuals that can support you on an independent basis to look at all these different types of scenarios and really give you some insight is going to be very helpful going forward in managing your fiduciary responsibilities.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Patrick, on all of that information. I want to open it up to everyone in the webinar. So now it is your opportunity. Please ask some questions. I've had a couple come in, but now's a great time to submit them. Again, please, if you can, throw in the name of the speaker you'd like to ask and give as much context as we can. I see one question that came in first. I didn't have someone's name applied to it. So Chelsea, if you can take this one for me, that'd be great.
Sure.
But the question I had is, what is the best first step if this is all new to someone joining the call?
Uh-huh. So if this is all brand new to you, the very first step would be forming the committee and making sure you're picking the right people for that committee. From there, it's protecting the committee with the committee charter, the conflicts of interest disclosure forms. We have all of this for our clients, but if you are not one and you need it, I will share my resources with you, no problem. Please just reach out. From there, though, if let's say maybe the next question would be, okay, well, I have my committee. What now, right? Well, get your data. That is by far the most important thing. The other thing that I feel like I'd really, really want to press for people who are not, especially if you're not our clients, you really need to look at your contract language. Transparent PBM, that's not enough. Like there's a lot of funky stuff we're finding in transparent PBM contracts. You really need to do due diligence on this contract language. It looks like we had another question come through. Types of insurances for a self-funded health plan. So first off, for the committee, you're going to want that fiduciary insurance, Lena. You're going to want the fidelity bond, which you likely already have. You're going to, if you have a board of directors, they need the D&O, directors and officers insurance. And then one that seems to be kind of questionable, some organizations have it, some don't, would be errors and omissions insurance. And then obviously cybersecurity for your company. Those would be the big ones. Anything to add there, Donovan or Patrick?
No, I would just say I understand the irony of getting insurance for your insurance program. Trust me, I get it. But they are pretty cheap insurances to have, respective to, employee benefits and the seriousness of this. I always like to refer back to the decision making to what we file in the 5500. This is a health and welfare plan for your people. And I always think that kind of highlights the seriousness of what we do and the decisions we're making when we're talking about this.
Yep. So for the Ethos clients on the call, again, in your fiduciary portal, this entire process from committee establishment, the insurances, vendor management, cybersecurity policies for every single vendor, contract review for every vendor, showing your due diligence, showing your work, and as well as the management. How is the plan performing? How are the vendors performing? That is literally in the portal. And that's what we go through on your quarterly meetings. So again, the biggest thing for you guys is going to be sharing this training with your entire committee if they aren't here, and going through that decision-making tree that Patrick provided when you get the slide deck, and just making sure that anybody that is currently on your committee doesn't have a felony or something crazy going on, right? Like they should be on your committee. And then maybe even considering, are there other people we need on it? So you guys should have hopefully some peace of mind knowing that this framework is taken care of for you. And again, happy to share any resources to those that are on the call, not a client, but need some guidance. This is very, very important. Obviously, the lawsuits that are happening, they are larger companies, right? But they are coming down market. I got a text from a friend who lives in Chicago the other day, and she was in a like a subway thing underground, and there was a billboard of an attorney group basically trying to solicit employees for mental health parity, saying like, do your mental health benefits equal your PCP visits and your specialist? Like that, it's coming. So you just really gotta be ready, and it's not as hard as it sounds.
Awesome.
We had
I think
to make a joke in the chat, but
yeah. Did you see any other questions, Chelsea? I've got one that was submitted to me here.
nope.
Okay. Let's go with Donovan for this one. But Donovan, how can they get their compensation disclosures from their broker? And do they need to record it? I mean, how does that whole process work?
Yeah, a couple funny things about compensation disclosure. So it is mandatory, and there's all kinds of penalties for employers and plan sponsors if they don't get them. However, it is not mandatory for a broker to give it to you, which is one of the many problems with our industry and how things operate. So almost all brokerages, agencies, consultants, have started to give these because clients are asking this information. Like this has been law since 2021, right? Since the beginning of 2022, rather, January. So just ask your broker consultant for it. We see these come in a lot of ways. I mean, I read one last week. It was 16 pages. And from reading all 16 pages, all the fine print, I could still not determine the amount of compensation. I mean, the compensation could have been 500,000 a year, could have been $1 million a year. All 16 pages still did not properly disclose it. So if you ask for it, you should get it. If they can't give it to you, get upset that you're asking, that's probably your first sign to pull the ripcord and start looking for other options. But don't be surprised when you get it that it still is very vague and doesn't have actual amounts. So there'll be a lot of references to all of the additional ways they can get paid. And that's the kind of stuff you should start pressing on, start asking questions about. And I also think a good recommendation for compensation disclosures is seeing prior years. So seeing, did this grow for them while your premium went up, and they offered no additional services, right? And those are the kinds of things that'll allow you to start asking better questions. As a company, you guys make these decisions, you hire them. You can request for that relationship to go any which way that you see will serve your organization best.
In the chat, I've included a sample compensation disclosure, so you should be able to download it. Austin, why don't we go ahead and add that to the email that goes out tomorrow as well for everybody. This is a sample. It literally is it's from ERISA, like it's the document you're supposed to use. So you can send this to all service providers in your plan and say, hey, we're working really hard to get compliant with the CAA and we need this on file. Something just to reiterate on what Donovan said, you might see the direct compensation clearly outlined. It's likely a commission if you're working with a more traditional broker. Hopefully it's a fee, right? That's a little less conflicted. But to his point, the hidden compensation, also known as indirect, is really the more problematic. And that's where the question should be asked. So if you look at the tiny fine print of the disclosure that you maybe do have, you want to be looking for things that say, compensation based on plan retention. So if you can Command F, whatever you have on file from them, Command F, plan retention, Command F, premium growth, Command F, aggregate, book of business. There's a lot of ways that these additional compensations can be held. And what that means, by the way, is basically growing your premium and keeping you in the same place increases compensation.
Awesome. Well, I mean, holy cow, guys, this has been so much information. I think we're just about out of time. If you do have additional questions, I'll give you a way to do that. A couple things as a wrap up here is you will be receiving a certificate. So thank you so much for joining. Everyone that did join, here's kind of the cadence and the promise that we have to you is you will receive this recording by end of day tomorrow. And then by Monday, at some point Monday, we will get you your certificate, and you'll be able to use that and do whatever you want with it. You can brag about it to everyone about how smart you are now, but we'll get that over to you Monday. If you do have additional questions from today's webinar, or you just want to understand more, maybe you want to talk more about this in person, Chelsea and Donovan would love to chat with you, and even have specialized individual time. So please feel free to send them an email. It's just always their first names at ethosbenefits.com. Connect with us on LinkedIn. Connect with us in your inbox, in your email. And we just appreciate you guys so much. Is there any other additional thoughts, or is everyone all good to close at this point?
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. We appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. We'll catch you at the next webinar next month.